Morning, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you don't know me, my name is Hillary Bierstrom. I work with Star Energy. And today we're going to talk about Database Management 101. I have Bryce with me. He's going to help. Here we go. So today we're going to talk about the types of geodatabases, their characteristics, how to create an enterprise database connection. So if you have an enterprise database, you're going to need to know how to access that data. And then we're going to talk about distributed data, Geo Database Maintenance. I'm going to touch a little bit on Datastore, and if we have time, we're going to talk about domains and subtypes. Okay, so there are 4 types of databases that work with ESRI. One's the personal geodatabase. This is one of the original databases that started with ESRI. It really isn't recommended to use if you want to use it for like a network or anything that's going to have a lot more data in it. Then there's a file geodatabase. That is an ESRI created structure, and that's definitely one they recommend if you're not going to have an enterprise database. All right, so file geodatabases are going to be the ones that you're going to mostly use when you need to transfer your data to somebody else. For example, a right-of-way maintenance person or somebody in the office that is using a PMF, a published map from ESRI. Okay, and then there's enterprise geodatabase. That's got the extension SDE, and that can represent a ton of different kinds of databases. The most common are the Microsoft SQL Server, and then SQL Express. We also have Oracle and Postgres. And then we also have Datastore, and that is actually used with the ESRI Enterprise setup. So you would have to have your GIS server federated with your portal. So I wanted to kind of show you in a chart the characteristics between the different databases, and so you can kind of better choose the right database for what you're using. So the number of users is a big one. For personal and file geodatabases, you can only have one editor, and you can have multiple readers. For an enterprise database, you can have multiple readers and multiple editors, okay? So that's kind of where you're gonna decide whether or not do you have multiple people that need to edit the database, and do you need this database to be, say, replicated into other locations. And then the Datastore, the number of users is based on the number of portal users you have in your ArcGIS for portal. Okay, so the structure of each of the databases, the personal database is a Microsoft Access database. It's really great to use if you have some temporary data and you need to go in there and maybe even create some queries or forms off that data, and you still want to be able to use it in a map. The file geodatabase, if you open up your Windows folder, it's going to look like a folder, so you're going to have to be careful to make sure you don't delete things inside that file geodatabase. It could be corrupted. You can actually store things in there, and you can also store raster images in there. I don't really recommend storing it in one that you have to transfer a lot, but you can definitely store rasters in a file geodatabase of its own. And then the enterprise databases are structured as tables, and then they add on these fields that are called like geometry or geography fields that give them their spatial look. Okay, and then the Datastore, which I didn't even realize this, is actually a Postgres database, and it's also set up the same way as your enterprise because it's an enterprise database. The Datastore really is set up to work with your portal, so you can publish services from portal and then also run some of the tools and the analysis in portal, and it'll put those results there. The size limits, so for a personal, the max you can have is 2 gigabytes, but you're really going to have a performance issue at about a half a gigabyte. Then the file geodatabase, it's 1 terabyte, so it's really quite large, and that's per data set, and you can have multiple data sets in each file geodatabase. And then for enterprise and Datastore, they're both limited to the database model. So for example, the SQL Express, which is probably a lot of you that have workgroup have SQL Express, and that is limited to 10 gigabytes. So you always want to be careful if you're using a SQL Express database, for example, and you're taking pictures, you might have to either take some of those photos out or maybe create a database of its own for those pictures. And then a PostgreSQL, it's unlimited. So you could store as much data in there as you wanted. ESRI licensing, it is specific for each kind of database. So for a personal and file, you can use a basic license, but that's going to be for simple editing. So that's going to be anything like just that's not in a network or any kind of topography. If you want to edit network data, you would have to have a standard ESRI license. For an enterprise, it's the same thing. You can view basic, simple data in an enterprise, but I don't think you can edit it. So, or can you edit the archived? You might be able to edit data that's not versioned, I think. So we'd have to look into that. But for an enterprise, you're going to need, you would just need a standard license for ESRI. I wouldn't recommend anything less. And then for Datastore, the licensing, you actually have to have an ArcGIS server and a portal installed, and they have to be federated, so for that to work. And then the platform, it's just Windows mostly, and the file geodatabase is a little bit more fluid, so if you needed to transfer data to somebody you don't know if they have a Windows or maybe they have a Mac or something like that, yeah, a file geodatabase would be a good example. All right, let's see here. All right, so now we're going to talk about creating database connections to those enterprise databases. This is really important because sometimes some of these are already just created for you, and you might have to know how to transfer that connection to another machine or to somebody else in the network. So to create database connections, you can do this in ArcMap or ArcCatalog. You're going to go to the database connections in it's a catalog window in ArcMap, but and then you're going to say add database connection. And we're going to go through this in the demo. You would need the following information before you even try to do a database connection, and that is the platform, whether it's a Postgres, an Oracle, a SQL, the instance or service name. Oracles have what's called a service name. And then permissions to that database. You need to either have Windows authentication enabled on that and have permission, or have database authentication and permissions. And then if you don't have the driver on your machine, you're going to need the ODBC driver to be able to access that. And for ArcGIS Desktop to access a driver, it needs to be a 32-bit because ArcGIS Desktop is a 32-bit software. And then you need the database name. Once you create these files, you can move them to different locations. So one of the things I do is I actually move it to a folder location that's easy to find. And then I'm also able to easily script maintenance and updates and stuff from those files. All right. Distributed data. And so all of this we're going to go on in our demo in the next slide. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background before we kind of just dove into it. So, all right. So distributed data is just a way to distribute data between your databases. So it could be a copy paste, which is a really common method for just needing to get somebody the data, but that can get kind of tiring if you're updating network changes all the time. So one of the things you can do if you have an enterprise database is create geodatabase replication. Okay, and you have to have an enterprise database for this to work, and this is going to allow users to either edit the database all at the same time, or they can create databases that they can edit locally and post those changes to the server that decide how they all get married up. And then a really good method of updating disconnected databases. So for example, if you have a file geodatabase that's being used for your map services or for the PMF that everybody's getting, that's a really good example of creating a one-way replica for that. And then there's a DBMS replication. This is a back-end way to distribute the data. It's the same kind of process, except instead of working in ESRI, it's actually working in the database management system itself.
I don't have anything on the chat.
All right. So first off, we're going to show you how to create the connection to your database. So sometimes what happens is you might not even know what your instance name is. So for example, on this machine, I have a SQL Express. So I'm going to go into my task manager and I'm going to look here under services and see what I've got for a name. So if I scroll down here, I can go, see if we can find it here, and right here, this is the one I'm using. It's called Hillary's GIS, okay? That's a really easy way to see which one you're using. And this isn't running, but this is still the same name. So it's just installed when you create your SQL Express. All right, so now if I want to connect to that database, say I lost connection. So one of the things that could happen is you lose your database, enterprise database connection. And that could be a few different reasons. One specifically is your authentication changing. So maybe you have a database that has the names and users stored in it and that changed, or the service itself can stop. And so you always want to make sure if you can't access your SDE database, then go into your services and make sure that that SQL Express is running. So, so I'm just going to pretend here that I don't have this connection. I'm just going to go to here and I'm going to expand database servers. You can only use this section if you have a SQL Express database. If you have any other databases, you have to add it here. And either way, see if we click this one, it's going to look the same as this one up here. Okay, well this one you just put your server name or your machine name and the instance. So now we know it was Hillary's GIS was the instance. Now I can do my machine name here, I can do my IP, or I could do local host since it's on this machine. And it will connect to create a new connection. It would have created one, but this one's already here. So now, if I want to create a connection to a database itself, so if I would add it down here, it's database specific. I can't just create a connection to the instance itself. It's only per each database. So if I wanted to create a database connection here, and I have this already in my setup, I can just right click on here, and I can go to Save Connection. Okay, I'm going to save one. I'm going to put it down here and rename it. So if you have a bunch that you don't take the time to name, like me, you're going to have to look and make sure you got the right one. And expand it. Yep, that's the right one. We can rename it to sample. And now we can actually copy this and we can take it wherever we want. We can just throw it up here into another folder, and then we can connect to that through that connection. Now we're frozen. And this is actually on my machine, so. As many of you know, it's probably best to not cancel that because it takes longer. Then you should just let it go. All right, let's see, where did I put this here? Down here, we'll just throw it in here. And see, it's just a simple copy paste. It's just like a file. If you would look at that in your Windows your Windows browser, you're going to just notice that it looks a little bit different, but it has the same name. So it's really nice when you do rename these that you give them a name that you don't have to type a whole lot in for scripting. But it's clear, you know. Computer's super slow, so we won't go through that right now. But here, now we can see that we have those options available. We can disconnect connection properties. That's what this is now. I'm doing operating system. If I had a user on here, like sometimes you can create a generic user that's on the database so that you can transfer this to multiple machines and it's not based on Windows authentication. You can do that. You know, you got to be careful then, because then if somebody puts it on somebody else's machine, they can automatically have access to the data. All right, so we're going to look at adding some permissions. So one of the things that you have to know before you create a database connection is how to, or if you have permissions. So one thing you can do is, let's come over here. You can see, for this one, it's SQL Express, so you could actually see it in SQL Management Studio. That's usually how I like to work. But there's a permissions here. If you right-click under the database servers, there's a permissions. It's going to show you who has permissions on this, okay, and what level they have. So for example, if I had read-only, I'd be able to put that there. So let's go ahead and you can add users by using this tool here. You can do it in SQL Management Studio. So we can create a database user. We're just going to grab that connection file that we just created. Where are we at here? Here, drag it, and just drag and drop is fine. All right. Operating system, that's if we want a Windows authentication, but we're just going to do a GIS. Oh, we don't want a role. I'm just going to leave a role empty. Oh, maybe not. Let's see. Password requirements. That won't work. I could turn that off too, but I'm not going to for this right now, so I'm just going to go. It's not complex enough. There we go. All right, close. So now if we come back here, we're going to see on this database, let's see if I can see it here. I can't remember. No. All right. So we're going to come back down here because if you have SQL Express, it really is a lot easier to manage things under this database server. I wish they did this for Enterprise, just because it is a lot easier to just right-click and see things than having to go through the SQL Management Studio. All right, so now you can see that this has a user on it, but if I didn't give this user any access, they wouldn't be able to do anything. So I'd have to give read-write if I want them to edit, or read-only is possible too. So for example, if you want to share a SQL connection so everybody can see your ABL data, and you want to put it on everybody's machine, this is where you could add a read-only access and a permission. Okay, so now we are going to talk about replication. Here, I did the easy way, so let me show you the harder way quick too. Here, if you know what kind of platform you have, so if, for example, if you have an Oracle you want to connect to, that's a really common one, but you actually have to install the ODBC driver to be able to do that. That's a little bit harder, but once you install it, it's a lot easier to work with. And so you choose SQL Server, we put in that same local host or machine name, and then GIS. And instead of operating system, you're going to pick database authentication. And see if I can remember how I did this. Oh. So now see how I got an error? because I didn't put the password in right. Now I'm gonna have to wait for it. But what I could have done there is if I would have gotten that password in right, it's gonna give you a drop down of the databases on that instance. I'm gonna pick the database I wanna connect to, and then I'm gonna hit save the settings here. So then I would hit save settings here. Let's try one more time. Yeah, should have wrote it down. Anyways, this is where you would see the list of databases. I think I might have one here. Here, let's go. Oops, I want to connect. Here, connection properties. So here, I would see all these different databases, and it would be database. This is where you would hit the save. Okay? All right, so I have a map here, and so we were talking about Geo Database replication. So a lot of you probably already have your data replicated, and I'm just going to kind of show you some simple syncing and checking to make sure that your database is being sent to the right location. Okay, so here I've got a replica. So I'm going to pick the connection here. And so this is what's called a Replica Manager. This is going to show you the name of the replica, what type it is, if it's a one-way or if it's a two-way. If it's two-way, that means the person can edit. And then it's going to show if there's any conflicts. It's also going to show if it's coming from a version. So what you can do on a SQL database is you can actually create multiple versions, and you can create a replica from that version. So a good example would be you have your main database, which is called a default version, and then you create another version maybe called QC, and everybody's replica comes from this QC, and then as they edit, they post to this QC version, and then somebody will have to go in there, review the changes, and then post those to the default. And it's just a way to be able to manage the changes, but not too many people. We have a lot of multiple editors, so we don't really set people up on that anymore. One of the biggest things that I like to use this for is to see the syncing status and how it's been going. So one of the things, go to properties, not properties. Is it properties? No, not properties. Actually, properties is good because you can actually see everything that's in your replica here. So you can find out if you missed something, or if you added something and you couldn't remember if you had recreated the replica. That's where you could check it out right here under this description. But come here and go view log. This is where you're going to be able to tell if you have a fail. So for example, somebody says, you know, I'm not seeing those changes you made to the map yesterday. You can come into your map, you can go to the Replica Manager, and you can just take a look at the log file. And these should all be a success, okay? Sometimes I've seen this get a little bit funny with the querying, and I always go all, and then I sort it because for whatever reason, it just doesn't sort, and it can be kind of misleading. So always make sure you sort first and have them all showing before you go and worry that you got a problem. Okay, so now we are going to create it. I just want you to see the benefit of having this. So for example, let's say we have a PMF that everybody runs a process at night and copies down to your machine, and they're going to be copying this database that's along with it. Well, we need to be able to update that database, and I don't want to go and every day I'm copying this database from my enterprise and putting it in this file Geodatabase so everybody has updated data. So here we have a replica that is from the server, and it's going to a file Geodatabase. We're just going to create an outline here. Okay, I'm going to click save. Okay, so you can't be editing when you sync. We're going to click sync changes. Okay, I'm going to click the right one here. That's my instance here. Okay, next. This is the replica. If there was more than one, you'd want to make sure you have this right. This is the location. You have to make sure you have access to it this way. If you, for example, made your replica on a different machine, all you have to do is go out and find that database right here using the File Explorer. It's going to tell you what kind of way it's going to go. So we're just doing a one way on this one. We're going to hit finish. There's not really any questions because it's just one way. We're just sending the changes. Now you can see that I have my blue line showing up in front of my yellow line. So that means that database was now updated and it's ready for people to be downloading. So I wanted to show how easy it is to manage data when you have an enterprise database. I think it's one of the most important things to know how to do. I'm just going to go back and we're going to go to the next. Geo Database Maintenance. So this is the one where you have to look at and go, all right, you know, do I have a script running that's updating or maintaining my database, or do I manually do this often enough? Is my map starting to get slower? Is it really hard to edit features? Then you're probably going to want to look at different kinds of maintenance that you can do on your database. So one of the biggest things for data recovery is having a backup, whether that be the server is backed up to another location, or you're just creating a simple script that's exporting an XML. So for me personally, I like to have a script that exports an XML because I don't want to have to say to the IT, hey, can you restore the server from yesterday? You know, my data got corrupted. This way, if I have an XML export, I can just, or a backup, a SQL backup, I can just restore that backup and I don't have to worry about restoring the entire machine. Some of the things too to keep in mind, when you update your ESRI, you will want to go into our catalog and right click on it, and it's going to show you if you need to update your Geo database. And what that does is it updates the status tables and everything to the newer version of SQL that you installed when you upgraded ESRI. Generally, when you upgrade ESRI, you're going to also upgrade SQL. So that's going to help get you upgraded correctly before you update your SQL. Add appropriate attribute indexes. That's per feature, table, and field. So, for example, I recommend adding indexes on anything that is queried, searched, or symbolized on. And this is going to help speed up your map quite a bit, actually. You also want to keep version geodatabases in sync and any replicas synced. So before you do a compress, you're going to want to make sure everything's synced and, what do they call it, posted. Yeah, so they call it posting for versioned and syncing for a replica. Okay, and then you're going to want to perform these tasks regularly. I definitely recommend creating a script. They're actually pretty easy. At the end of this presentation, there's a link that actually shows you a video of how to set Python script up to do some maintenance. So, you know, you could watch that and do that. I mean, it's one of the really more basic scripting pieces you can do. And it'll pay off to just have it going. And then analyze, which calls like update statistics. In a SQL Server Express, it automatically does it. So you don't necessarily have to do it unless, for example, you go through and you import a bunch of changes. Then I would recommend running the analyze. Yeah, so I was going to think of something else, but I lost it. Okay, so here are some steps. I wanted to write these down just so you understand, you know, so you kind of have a checklist of things that I would look at doing. So the first thing I would do is, if you have an enterprise database, you need to make sure that you are compressing that data. And to get a good compress, one, everything has to be synced in. And if you can, you know, delete the version, delete it. You can delete it and recreate it, and that's fine. And then make sure all the connections are terminated on that database before compressing. That's going to get you the best compression. Ideally, even if you wanted to get a really good compression, you'd have to unregister all those replicas and recreate them, but that's not necessary. Okay, and then for file and personal geodatabases, you're going to want to do what's called a compact. Okay, that kind of does the same, in a sense, a little bit of the same thing, where it's just rearranging how the data is stored on the disk, and it's just going to help improve performance actually quite a bit. And then rebuilding the indexes is going to help with querying and rendering the data. And I definitely recommend doing all of those in a script at night. Python is what ESRI uses for their library. All right, so now we're back to a demo.
In the chat, we'll see any questions.
All right then. All right, so let's see what I'm going to do on this one. Geo Database Maintenance. Oh yeah, that's what. All right. So to maintain a database, so we're going to look at this one first. This is that enterprise database. So we're going to right click on here. We're going to go to administration. And here we have all these options, okay? We're going to have the compress database, and we're going to have this Geo Database Maintenance. Here we have the analyze. You can check that if you want. It's not going to hurt. The rebuild, I would not shrink the database. So I've seen this kind of cause problems if you ever do it. So, all right, let's see here. What do we got? So if we just hit a compress, what it's going to do is it's going to create a table in this database. That's another way to be able to tell that your script is running. It's going to add a row in here, and it's going to tell you the compression. If we've set these up for you, you probably already have these tables in here. You should be able to come in here and see if you have a script running that's compressing your database, and it would give you a date and an end, and it's going to give you this count and this count. And ideally, you're going to want to keep this below 5 if you can. Rarely do I ever really see it at 1, but below 5 is a good one. I've actually seen these get up into the thousands, and the map is usually really, really, really slow then. So I'm also going to show you here, I'm going to show you how to create a couple indexes. So when you add indexes, it is a schema change, so you actually have to kill all the connections to the database, which I should probably show you that too. And be careful, because if you have other editors on here, it will cause problems. So you just want to make sure you know that you're the only one editing. So you go to the Connections tab. After you go to the Properties, you go to Show Connections, and I can just right-click on this, and I can just say Disconnect. That's going to kill me in the map, but that's where you get rid of those. Now, if I wanted to keep connections off, I could actually uncheck this if I had a lot of work to do and I want to make sure that nobody's able to get on. That's what you could do, but you have to be careful because you want to make sure that you check that back on when you're done. All right, so we're going to come in here and we're going to add a couple indexes. And that's under this tab here. It's called Index. So these ones are automatically created. And in SQL databases, you can actually have more than one field under each one of these. In a file geodatabase, you can only have one title index per field. But we can just click Add, and then we could just click Subtype, because that's what we're going to symbolize on. Click Next, click OK, and now we have it. That's going to be an index that we're going to be able to speed up the querying and the symbolizing for the data. And that's as easy as how that is. Once it's on there, you don't have to do it again. And you can do these on separate databases. So for example, if I want to come in here to this file geodatabase and add a couple more indexes, I can, and it's not going to affect the map on the server. So when you do add indexes, it will slow your editing down. So if it doesn't seem to be too bad, I would go ahead and leave them on there. But if it's too much, then take them off your SQL and put them on your replicated database. But then you'll have to run it all again. You can script it to run it again, but you can run it again. You'll have to add them back in there. But with this one, if I would go to, oops, I got a connection on that. Can't kill connections on a file geodatabase. It's kind of one of the hardest ones to get that lock to go away that's on there. Can really tie things up sometimes. Let's see here. All right, so now we go and now we're able to add one. Go to this test. Let's just see if we can add two. I'll show you. It'll give you a warning. Yep, does not support it. So you would actually have to go test and then do your subtype, whatever. Click apply, and then it's in there. So this is a good one to have especially your databases that serve up your map services, to have that on here. That's what I use Replication a lot for, is to create a disconnected database that we can push changes to for a web map. For example, it's quite a bit faster. Okay, let's see what we got here. If you don't have SQL Express, you're going to have to run all of your, or most of your maintenance stuff through the services tools over here. You can still compress over here, but you can't do the rebuild. You'll actually have to run the tool for that. But you can sync, so we can click and sync from Art Catalog as well. And then you can manage your replicas here as well, okay? All right. If you just choose to do, for example, one of your, compresses through here, you can just do this, compress, run the tool, and then we can right-click and grab the Python snippet out of here. You post that into an IDLE, you run it, and if it runs, you can put it in Task Scheduler. It's pretty simple. Just grab it. And then you just come up here and you go right-click, copy as Python snippet, and then you just paste it in. I do a lot that way just because it's easier than typing it all out. That's another reason why having this connection here is nice, because it'll actually copy the connection and you really don't have to change much of anything with it. All right, so let's come down here and take a look and make sure we got all of our maintenance stuff covered up here. If you ever have to do some work on your SQL database, like for example, let's say we're putting in a new development, but I don't want to mess up my current map. I only want to post the changes if I like it, I can come in here and I can actually create a new version here. I can add it, and then I can also come into the map when I open that back up, and I can flip to that version. And what that is, it's like having an internal copy of the database, and it will stay that way until you decide to post them to your default, the main database. Anytime somebody's doing a lot of like testing and some unusual things with their map, I definitely recommend doing that so you don't mess up your main map. And I'll show that when that comes up, how to switch between the two in the ARC map. Bryce, can you think of anything else for maintenance?
I don't think so. Maybe like with that versioning and with replicas, like when to use replicas or when to use versioning,
Yep.
When would be a good example of those?
Yeah, so that would be it. Versioning, for example, if you need a QC area where you have multiple editors and you need to bring all that back into one version. Or if, like I just mentioned, where you're doing an unusual project and you need like a copy of the data, and you might want to submit that to the server. That's a really good way to do that one. And then for replica, it's anytime you want to distribute the data, whether it be a one-way for somebody to use for PMF or just to take and grab and copy and put somewhere else. It also works as a backup, of your data. And then I lost it. Anyways, yeah, that's all I got. Let's see here. I swear it was Monday. We're doing pretty good yet on time, I think. We'll still have time to cover the rest here, which is the data store I wanted to go into, and then domains and subtypes. If this thing ever clicks over.
While you're waiting, I was thinking on that Geo Database where you had an issue with the lock on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can check that in your File Explorer, right? You can see
Yep.
like a machine name in there.
Yeah, you should be able to see in there the lock. and the lock file. Sometimes those ghost too, where you don't have a connection to it anymore, and it'll still like stay, and you have to go and manually remove it. I don't see it happen as much as it used to happen, but it still does happen. Let's see here. Don't see it in here. I wonder if I don't have that view on. Do I have it open? I do. Oh, here, I'm in this wrong one. Yeah, so I don't see it here.
Do you have to actually, I think you gotta click into that, and then you'll see
Oh,
like
like
the
inside the folder, yeah.
files in there will have,
Oh, there it is, that lock.
so you could potentially see whose machine was
If I
on.
wanted to delete it there, I could do that, but I wouldn't delete anything else in here if you don't have
Yeah,
to.
just to look.
That actually makes me think of something. If I'm having an issue with a lock on a file, I could probably search for that .lock file and delete it in the script. Aha. Anyways. All right, so now for us to see what version we're in, so here we go to our sources tab in our map, okay? And we can say this is the default version. We can right click and we go change version, and we do this, okay? Now if I go and edit, I can edit a line. I can add it in here, and I'm not gonna see that in the main database until I do what's called a post, which ironically, you have to be editing for it to sync instead of like a replica, you have to stop editing. Let's stop editing, click save, and just switch back to it. Yeah, see, and it's not there. Now if I come over here and I go versioning, change my version back here, start my edit session. Here's this versioning tool. I click this reconcile. You can click, I recommend definitely by attribute if you have multiple editors. If you're the only one, I wouldn't worry about it. And then in favor of edit, that's the one we just edited. That's not the parent. Then post. All right. And then we are going to stop editing and switch back to our main version. And we're going to see that that is now in there. So that's a good way if you have something you need to add, but you're afraid you might mess up your data, a good way to do it. And then post it when you know you have it right. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the presentation. Okay, so Datastore, I kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit because everybody's going mobile and you know, it's kind of like out there, right? So there is something called Datastore inside our GIS Manager. It can kind of be confusing. That Datastore is just a record of file locations for your data. Okay, that has nothing to do with what this is called. Is actually Datastore for our GIS. This is a separate software that you would install on your server, and then you would have to use it with our GIS server and portal. And then you have to have those two federated. So you wouldn't have your security at the ArcGIS Manager anymore. It would be at the portal level. And so what that's going to do, it's just going to give you, it's going to be like having ArcGIS Online inside your firewall, okay? And so that's going to allow you to publish directly to the portal, be able to use the analysis tools, be able to store like live data, real-time data if you needed to. So I mean, you could store like AVL history and storms data and stuff like that. But the biggest thing is it requires enterprise standard and federated with your ArcGIS server. So if you have enterprise workgroup, that won't work. You have to have a standard ESRI license. Okay. All right. So working with domains and subtypes, this isn't necessarily a database management 101. So if you choose to just kind of drop out, that's fine, and I understand. And I wanted to thank you for coming today. And then I also want to mention July 8th, Bryce here will be in the hotspot, and he's going to be doing a mobile app presentation. So now we're going to go ahead and get into the working with domains with the last, 10 minutes we have. And I wanted to throw this in here because even though it's not a database management, it is a data management. It's incredibly important to use and utilize. So a subtype is a subset of features in your feature class or table. It's often used with domains. You can apply multiple domains to one field attribute, and I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to explain why this is really important to use, when to use it, and maybe when not to use it. It must be an integer field, whether it's a short integer or a long integer. And then you must set your domains under the subtypes tab and when the subtypes are enabled. And I think that's kind of what gets a lot of people, because you go to set your domains in the fields section and you don't see the domain come through, and that would probably be why. And then so the most common question you're probably going to ask yourself is, should I use a subtype or create a new feature? So what I would say with that is are all the other fields the same? And is it the same purpose, but you need to have different options under each domain? For example, I have transformers, but I have some overhead and I have some underground. You know, so for my assembly type, I don't want to see all the overhead and the underground. I just want to see the which one I've picked. And so that's kind of what we're going to show here next, okay? What a domain does, if you haven't used one before, it enforces data integrity by creating what's called a dropdown. So you can't select anything else. There are two different types of domains. There's a range, so you could actually decide a value between a number system, so they could go between 10 and 20 is all they can select. Or you could do a coded value, and that could be a text, a number, or any other date. No, I don't know if you can do a date, but any other kind of value in your field. The most important thing is if you're creating a subtype or a domain type, the type matches the field type. So you can't create an integer domain and put it to a text field. So that's pretty important. And then something to keep in mind too is where this is really helpful is, for example, if you're wanting to put all your assemblies in, you can export your assemblies from your staking platform into a table, and then you can load those into a domain. So you could just have that kind of also integrity, so you know it's going the same in both applications. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go do that demo. All right, so here, to do domains, you have to have all the connections disconnected as well. If you are doing this on, say, a database that has map services on it, there's something you can do when you publish it that will allow you to make schema changes to the database without having to shut down your ArcGIS server. And if you want information on that, just give me a call and I can show you how to do that. All right, so here is a field. Okay, this is the fields that we have in here. So I've got what kind of fields? I got a text and an integer. Okay, so my subtype, it has to be an integer field. So I already have that in there, okay? And then I have this here. I could, if I wanted to, hold on a minute. Oops, not gonna let me. Do I not have one? I bet you I didn't create one yet. So here, let's go up here and do it. We're going to properties, we're going to create a domain first. Oh, text. I do have them here. All right. Let's see why it wasn't working. I must have a lock on it. Oh, I do. It's right here. Do as I say, not as I do. Let's see here. Hello. Okay, so now you can see that I have two text domains here. Okay, if I would have had like a number domain, it wouldn't have showed up here. Okay, so I could have added it here. However, I'm going to implement my subtypes because I want to have different conductor for each type. I don't want to have a long list of all of it. I want to be able to limit it. I don't want somebody to pick a one-off by ACR by accident for an underground, okay? So we're gonna do this. We're gonna say 1 is overhead. I always start at 1. I recommend starting at 1 and not 0. 2 is underground. Trust you guys will remember that. I'm not going to. All right, so now we're gonna do conductor size. This is where we're gonna set our domain. If you ever try to set up a domain and it's not working, come and check to see the subtypes tab and see if it's enabled. If it's enabled, then you need to set your domain here. All right, so overhead, and then we're gonna click this next one, and we're gonna select underground. So here's what's nice about this. We can actually set a default value here as well if we wanted to, but we're not going to. And then if we wanted to select the default type. So when you initially put in a feature, if you don't specify, it would go under that one. We're gonna click OK. All right, so now we're gonna go back and open our map up and show how that works. If you're using ArcGIS Online, domains are working about the same way. You know, instead of doing it in our catalog, you're going to do it in a browser environment. But having those set up is really important. Let's see, did I miss anything here? Or maybe I can add this before it opens. Let's see here. Int. 1. So you can do an integer as a coded value as well. You just type it in, 2. So your description, if I wanted to say 3 and say hello, it would say hello and they wouldn't see the 3. But when you do a data export, this is what comes out. All right, so let's do that. Let's do 1 and high for the overhead. I just want you to see the difference that it comes in that way. See if it loads ever. One thing I wish they would work on, speed of how fast a map opens.
Yeah. I think ours is always worse too because of the amount of connections that we have compared to, seems like every time we're on somebody else's machine, theirs seems to be a little faster, so that's
Yeah.
good anyway.
It does make a difference. All right, while this is up, I'm just going to show you this. Right here is this link that I was talking to about using Python. And then this is just another one about some information about deciding what kind of database and what you need for your software, or your hardware, I should say. All right, so now if we just go and edit this, but now we're going to have those domains here. So, so I'll show you here. I'm just going to add this one is going to be subtyped underground. Yes, we'll change that, and then we're going to add one on. See how it just said only the URD in here? Now, I'm going to add this one. Come on, there we go. This is going to be overhead. Yeah, that's okay. That's just a warning saying you're going to change your subtype, so all these options will change. There's my high. So, you know, before I put a 1 in there, but now it says high. That's what the users would see. Now I've got that limitation. So now we've got that data integrity, knowing that they're going to pick the right conductor type without an accident in that area. All right, so that's all I have for today.
I was going to mention on that too with the use of subtypes. Mm-hmm. You know, it's one way you know, within like your mobile applications within ArcMap and stuff, you don't really have the ability to do like conditional fields where you select, you know, yes on this, it drops another one down. But using subtypes is a good way, and Hillary's used that before with like line patrols or with different, you know, maintenance type of maps or something you're using, that you could kind of narrow down the fields. Mm-hmm. You know, I think one you had was like if it was a tree issue, it would just show issues that pertain to a tree or a, you know, branch on a line or something. Or you could switch it to an anchor issue and it would just give you those instead of a list of like 100 things. Yep. So you could use it for more than just what was shown like in this scenario.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something you will want to use. And easy to update too. I mean, if you decide, hey, I've got some names in here, or we no longer use that conductor, you just come in here, you can delete it, and then you can add a new one. It does not delete the data in your database. It just only allows that option is all. So, all right. So thank you guys, for taking your time and listening to me talk. I hope you all stay healthy.
Yeah.